All right, so this is how to be great at conversations, man. You guys, there's so many other tips. As I was going back through this book today, as I was doing some of the slides, I was like, man, I could have done so many different things on this one, and that's one book alone. Behind me, I probably have 5 or 6 other books that have excellent conversation tips in them. There's just a lot to learn about communication, but hopefully I took some of the ones that I think are the most simple that you can use and the most impactful. So here is the goal. Here's the goal today for this one. All right, the goal is just to have interesting conversations. When you use and practice these methods, you will have more fun and interesting conversations with virtually anyone you meet. And they will walk away thinking of you as a very interesting person. And it's a little bit weird because what I'm going to say, I get a lot of questions, not necessarily about conversations in general, but conversations with women. And, how do I be a good conversationalist and all that stuff? And a lot of guys think that you have to do a lot of work, but it's very counterintuitive. But to be really great at conversations and to be super interesting in your conversations, you actually do a lot less work than you think. And I want to start this by talking to you guys about one of my mentors, my Uncle Steve, that really taught me some of the things we're going to cover today is 80-20 conversations, controlling the topics, and then WCIL, which means what can I learn? And my Uncle Steve is the best in person I have ever seen of anyone with conversations. And, my Uncle Steve is not Patrick Mahomes here, that picture there. But the reason why I put Pat Mahomes here is because something about my uncle, which we'll kind of get into as we talk about what makes a good conversationalist, is one thing is he just never talks about himself. He never talks or brags about himself, and he has some really cool accomplishments. For instance, okay, so last week I told you guys how I go to Minnesota every year to hang out with a bunch of family. That's all my mom's side of the family. My dad's side of the family mostly live in Oregon. And so I was born in Oregon. I live in Washington now. And once every single month, we get together with my dad's side of the family and we go over birthdays. We do, we celebrate holidays, whatever. We get together, chat, have dinner and all that stuff. So I have seen my Uncle Steve since I was a tiny, tiny little guy, 10 to 12 times at least a year. And it wasn't until I was 19 years old that I found out that my Uncle Steve was an All-American quarterback. He was like in Indiana, he was like on a billboard. I guess he was just a total stud. Like everybody around the area knew him. He ended up playing college football at a big school behind somebody that ended up playing professionally. He got hurt in college. But I was 19 and I'd seen him my whole life without ever knowing this about him. It was other people around me that finally told me like how good he was at a quarterback. Just another thing that like he literally never brags. He never talks about himself. He's always interested in other people, which I'm a little bit bummed about because when I was like 19 and I found this out about him and I was like, are you kidding me? You were this good? I was like, why didn't you teach me how to be a quarterback? Because guys, I'd be the left-handed Patrick Mahomes right now. I would have been in the Super Bowl last week. You guys would have seen me throwing dimes. So as I was growing up, going to all these family reunions, family gatherings, I would see no matter what, my Uncle Steve always was in a conversation with somebody, no matter if somebody brought a friend, if somebody brought a relative, if we had a relative from from out of town that he might not even know that well. It didn't matter who it was. My Uncle Steve would be there in a conversation with him. He could talk about anything with absolutely anybody. I don't care who it is, guy, girl, kid, they're, an elder. It was just amazing. So he's a guy that, let's see, when I was probably now 20, I went to my Uncle Steve at one of my gatherings and I just said, hey, I see how good you are with conversations. I see that about you. I know you're really good about it. And he's super humble. So he'll just be like, no. always. So I just kind of like, I know that you're really good at this. I just observed this about you. Can you help me become better at conversations? Like, are there some things that you think about that would help me? Because when I was 20, I was, really starting to kind of basically start my career as a teacher, basically. I'd go around to different schools. Sometimes I'd have to student teach. I'd have to meet a bunch of random people. I'd have teams of people that I would have to get along with and all that stuff. And I knew that he could teach me some stuff. So anyway, these are 3 of the most I would say the most important lessons I learned from him. And then reading different books throughout, it's like, oh, wow, this is exactly what my uncle was talking about. This was great, all that. And so the first one that we're going to start about is the 80-20 rule, okay? 80%, 20%, let them talk. This is something I've been telling guys for a long time on your dates to always do. But in general, with anybody you meet, if you can train yourself to try to speak no more than 20% of the time and let them speak 80% of the time. Now, already just saying this, if you're a guy that gets nervous around new people, you feel like you don't know how to keep conversations going, breath of fresh air. You have to do less. You do 1/5 of the talking, 20% or even less if you can. And the better you get at this, the better you'll get at talking 10% and having someone else talk 90%. So think of any random stranger that you've never talked to before. Like right now with you guys here, we could all probably get together and talk about certain topics that we can all agree on, and we would have conversations about them. But think about random people you've never talked to. A random person off the side of the street, is that you don't know for sure what you'd have in common with them. So what can you talk to them about? Well, the easiest thing is every single person knows how to talk about themselves. I mean, just think about that. Every single person knows how to tell their own life story. Because you've lived with yourself your entire life. Everyone knows their opinions on things. Everyone knows what their favorite things to do are, their hobbies, their passions. So anytime that you don't know what to talk about, it's super easy. You don't even have to worry about it. You let the other person talk. You find out about them. You become very curious about them. And then you can have conversations for long, long periods of time. Now, here's one of the tips that it's kind of counterintuitive, right? And actually, I will give you an example of what I remember reading about on some like pickup artist books when I was in early college. I remember reading The Mystery Method, which I don't know if you guys have read that or heard of that. And I remember reading these books, and I would just take the advice with a grain of salt. I would see what he would say or do, tactics to talk to women, and I'd be like, nah, that seems creepy. That seems like salesy. I don't want to do that. But I would use kind of the ideas they would give. Well, one thing I never liked that they would talk about in pickup stuff is telling stories about yourself to make you seem high value. So you would have guys that would go around trying to create these stories that they would tell women to to get them all thinking about, wow, what a cool guy. I'm telling this story about when I went skydiving over here. And literally it breaks, to me, the most important part of conversations, which is like the 80-20, letting other people talk. So I never liked that about stuff like that, about like pickup, like go around telling, all these stories about yourself. Other things you'd hear about that is like, if there's another alpha guy in the room, you got to tell a story that demonstrates higher value so he knows that you're the alpha. I'm like, that to me is just a bunch of crap. I would do it completely differently. So one of the biggest tips, right, is be interested in order to be interesting. Be interested in other people, and they will see you as very interesting. You don't have to have these crazy stories in your back pocket. All you have to do is be interested in learning about them. And another one right here, here, seek first to understand before being understood. Because what do most of all of us want to do when we talk to people? Let's just say, me and someone else met up, and, someone told me they were born in Oregon. And I immediately, in my head, want to go, oh, I was born in Oregon too. I want to jump in and tell you my story. I was born in Oregon too. Cool, right? But learning the discipline of knowing to try to get them talking about themselves and really becoming interested in them will make you an extremely interesting person. Yes, people love to talk about themselves. Lead in with a solid question and let them do the rest. Just chime in. Yes, absolutely. And there are a lot of ways that, in different settings, you can even morph this. Like when I'm on dates with girls, I play it a little bit differently, but it's all the same type of foundation. But that's exactly it. And we might get to some of this other stuff here, but there's a lot of little examples I can bring up. But I have a little part from the book here, from How to Win Friends and Influence People. I know it's an old school book. Can't really see that. There we go. By Dale Carnegie. Again, so good. Now, actually, and I will preface this for you guys, this is a really great book for conversation skills. Now, I would not take everything in this if you're trying to talk to women and attract them. It's a little bit differently. A little different in that case. But as far as like for work, for getting along with your family, getting along with getting promoted at your jobs, just being more likable, excellent book. So here's a little clip from this book here. So if you want to know how to make people shun you and laugh at you behind your back and even despise you, here is the recipe. Never listen to anyone for long. Talk incessantly about yourself. If you have an idea while the other person is talking, don't wait for him or her to finish. Bust right in and interrupt in the middle of a sentence. That right there is exactly what you can do if you want to make people just not like you and not want to be around you. That's exactly the recipe of what you should do. Interrupt them. Don't listen to them. Always try to talk over them, all of that stuff. In fact, I don't know if you guys can think of people right now in maybe not your friend group. Maybe they are your friends. I have some friends that are still like this. But I'm sure you have ran into people like this, and it's like draining. It's just so draining. It's the opposite of being a good conversationalist, because all you're doing is talking and making other people listen to you. Do you know people like that? I do, unfortunately. And the astonishing part of it is that some of them are prominent. Bores. That is all they are. Bores intoxicated with their own egos, drunk with a sense of their own importance. People who talk only of themselves think only of themselves. And those people who think only of themselves, Dr. Nicholas Murray Butler, longtime president of Columbia University, said, are hopelessly uneducated. They are not educated, said Dr. Butler, no matter how instructed they may be. Which to me, that means that some people, might have on their, resume that they're very educated. They have these college degrees and all that stuff. That is they're being instructed. That's not real education. Real education is knowing stuff like this, like let other people talk. Which is weird for me to say this, because what I do when I'm doing this channel is I'm literally just talking. I'm talking to a computer screen. I'm talking to this. But if you guys were to see me on a date, if you guys were to see me meeting random people at a networking event or people I haven't met before, it would be totally different. I would talk 10 to 20% of the time. It would just be very different. So if you aspire to be a good conversationalist, be an attentive listener. To be interesting, be interested. Ask questions that other persons will enjoy answering. Exactly what you said, Real Brio. Encourage them to talk about themselves and their accomplishments. Remember that the people you are talking to are 100 times more interested in themselves, in their wants and problems, than they are in you and your problems. A person's toothache means more to that person than a famine in China, which kills 1 million people. A boil on one's neck interests one more than 40 earthquakes in Africa. Think of that the next time you start a conversation. And that's principle 4 from this book. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Which is really fun too. It took me a while to train myself in this, but it becomes really, really fun when you really set your mind on, wow, I'm literally my whole goal is to just get them to talk about themselves and just to learn about them, to become very curious about them. It makes conversations with people so much more fun. It makes meeting people that you wouldn't suspect, maybe you didn't think you would have anything in common with someone. When you just let them talk and you just really let them express themselves to you, it makes connecting with people a lot more fun. It just makes it way more fun.
Don't forget, subscribe, like, comment, share the video, but definitely subscribe.